Of navigating the new. Today we're going to be talking about peace and prayer. And the verse I got was Hebrews 4:16. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. And it's interesting because just reading that verse by itself doesn't give the whole context to what Hebrews 4 is talking about, because before that, he was talking about how the Israelites didn't enter God's rest because they didn't mix what was happening with faith, and they weren't able to enter the promised land spiritually, so God didn't let them enter it physically. And in the same way, when he talks about prayer at the end, drawing near to the throne of grace, there's a place of peace that's mandatory to approach with confidence, because the oneness you feel when you've entered his peace, there's this revelation of being one with him and being in right standing with God. And when you don't have that, you're going to be praying from heaven to, or from earth to heaven, even though we're seated in heavenly places. So worshiping in spirit and truth, uh, when you're not worshiping in truth, it's I think it's very similar to how when we pray from earth to heaven, where we don't feel connected with him. That's why a lot of prayers are what we think we should pray, rather than coming from a place of oneness where you're flowing with him. So being one with him is mandatory for prayers to be effective. And that's what he wants us to do. And so entering his peace um, is a prerequisite for prayer to be in oneness, because this the when he says, let us with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, it's after he's talking about entering God's rest. So if we try to do this out of order, um, a lot of the time will be very either formal or in this place of begging, and that's not what he wants. He wants us to be in oneness with him. Um, and so the oneness is what everything flows out of. And so entering that peace is really, really mandatory. And that's why when you're in a prayer meeting and you feel that it's flowing, you feel everyone's listening, and it's almost like there's more waiting on God than people just um, saying things hoping heaven will answer, is not even it's not even true, because heaven's heaven's within us. And so that's where we have to worship in truth, worshiping in spirit and in truth. In that context, is it's coming out of you. And so getting into that oneness, we already are one, but entering into it so that we're actually worshiping in spirit and in truth and oneness with him, that's when that flow starts happening. And that's why you can feel that shift in prayer, in prayer meetings, when it's like people are talking, but you're waiting for the prayer meeting to start. Is um, when everyone gets in that place of peace, peace being really, really, really important for prayer to actually be uh, in, to be effective. And the verse, the effective fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. It's his righteousness that we are entering into, and when we enter into his peace. And so it's these things that are combined together. Um, you can't have effective prayer when you are uh, viewing yourself incorrectly, when you see yourself not the way God sees you, but the way that the accuser has convinced you of in your identity. when your identity's compromised, you're not you're not functioning in spirit and in truth, because it's not how God sees you. And so it's mandatory that we start to be more mystical about prayer, because prayer is supposed to be this flowing in oneness with Him. And um, and it's interesting because even in Hebrews 4 doesn't even talk about drawing near to the throne of grace until after he says, enter my rest, enter my rest. And entering his rest is so important. And entering it's almost like entering a place too, because it's this place in Jesus that's this peace where everything's already okay with you and Him, because you're one and you're in right standing with Him. And then everything that flows out of that is all the things that He wants to do, and you've already surrendered your agenda at that point. And so that's when you start to flow with Him, is because you're manifesting His will when you're flowing with Him, and you're under His authority actively in that time. And there's this presence and power that comes out of that. And so that's what's so important about the effective prayer, the effective fervent, or the fervent prayer of I should actually pull that verse up, because it's one that it's interesting, because a lot of the time when I've looked at it in the past, it's been okay, so a righteous man's prayer is very effective, but the thing about it is it's James 5:16. The thing about it is it's amazing how a lot of these things are also recipes for, it's like, okay, I need to take on His righteousness. I need to, and when I say need to, it's an active faith. It's not a works thing, and I can't drum up being one with Him. That is a process that He has built, that we enter into, and we go through it, and it's different every time, because sometimes He wants to talk about different things before we enter that rest. Sometimes He's like, well, let's talk about this thing that is pulling you out of my rest constantly, like if there's any worry, if there's any specific issue, if it's family, friends, whatever's going on, a lot of the time the enemy will use that issue that's ongoing to pull you out of His rest. And it's a temptation to pull you out of His rest, because the enemy's trying to convince you that by worrying you're going to solve the issue. And so, James 5:16, therefore confess your sins to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. So that's an ESV. And it's interesting, because the prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. And it's this moment when he says, as it is working. And it's interesting, because it's talking about the prayer doing working. And I think there's this work of God that He wants us to enter into by entering this great power of fervent prayer, and it's all from accessing His peace and then flowing with Him. We're not praying to Him; we're supposed to be praying from His dwelling place, and because being seated in heavenly places, He wants us to function out of the kingdom that we're born out of, not the kingdom we're ambassadors to. The dual citizenship isn't just, like I'm not there right now. It's I'm there and here. And so functioning from there, and really living in that oneness, that is going to, where being in heavenly places and being here, the thing, it's interesting because a lot of things in nature and design are prophetic. So gravity, it's a lot easier for things to go down than up. And so in the same way, heaven, when we're praying from heaven, it's coming down, and it's also coming from heaven. And so when we're functioning from heaven, it's the things that he desires. We can't function with our will when we're up here, because when we're up here we have to enter in. So entering in that peace, we are now subject to his authority, and that's why it's so powerful, is because it's heaven to earth. um, yeah. So anyways, yeah, that's what I have for you today. Be blessed.